Okay, good morning, everyone.
Morning, Karen.
We're going to try that again. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Karen.
Okay, so we got to be energy for each other. If we're not energy for each other, then this whole hour and bit that we're going to be together, people are going to start to disengage. And all that we have to say today is so exciting. You picked the best spot to be. So my name is Karen Murray, and I'm a vice principal in the Toronto District School Board. But what's really neat is that Measuring What Matters, this project, I was a part of it from, Dave, could you say from the inception, I would say? So when it was a seed of an idea to now all these wonderful, amazing things that are happening. So what we wanted to do today is to give you a one-pager, and you'll find it at your table. And if you don't have one, just get a signal. I'll try to get one to you so that you can have a little glimpse of what the project is if you're entering into the conversation for the very first time. It's in its fourth year, this project, and it's our way of thinking of new ways to engage in assessment, new ways of thinking, new ways of teaching, new ways of learning. Thinking through those amazing ideas of creativity and citizenship and social and emotional skills that sometimes we overlook in our day-to-day conversations with students and with each other as colleagues and in the way that we assess. So this morning you're going to hear from our wonderful panelists, and each one is going to come and share a specific space in their journey as they've been engaging in this work. The panelists, I just want to set up how I'm going to moderate this morning. First, each panelist will come up and spend a good maybe 5 to 7 minutes to just give you an entry into their area of focus. And then we're going to have a cross conversation where I've already provided them with 2 question prompts in which they will share, and then we're going to finally end with a question and answer piece from you. We're hoping this is a conversation, hence why I needed you to talk back to me, so that you get comfortable in us having this cross conversation. So we're going to begin first. We're going to begin first with Allison. Allison, how do I say your last name properly?
Bain, rhymes with name.
Bain, okay. I have to say that I'm so cognizant about names. My daughter always pushes back when someone calls her name wrong, so I try to be cognizant how I say it. Allison Bain is an educator in Hamilton Wentworth District School Board. She currently teaches grades 5, where she focuses on building a rich learning community with her students. For the past 5 years, she has used Measuring What Matters framework to both facilitate and assess teaching and learning across subjects. When Allison comes up, she'll be highlighting how students engage in a form of self-assessment. So let's just say good morning to Allison real quick. Okay, Pamela Crawford, you're going to give them a wave, is a special ed resource teacher at Muskoka Falls Public School. She has been with Measuring What Matters for a little over a year. She had the joy of experiencing multiple roles throughout a long career. And I love how she said, you name it, I've done it. So if you figured out something that she hasn't done, maybe there's a prize or something. When Pamela comes up to speak, she's going to highlight some of the depth and breadth in regards to the scales of the initiative. And then I have Kim Stolis, see? Is an educator, so wave Kim, so they know. Is an educator with the York Region District School Board. She currently teaches senior kindergarten and grade 1. Whoa. At a school in Markham. She has been involved in the Measuring What Matters project for 3 years. And when Kim comes up, she will be highlighting the role of the teacher in creating conditions for learning. And then we have Lynn Strangway. I did say it right, but I have more familiarity with that. Lynn is a superintendent within the Toronto District School Board. She has responsibility for 19 schools. It's like a whole board by herself Lynn be dealing with. 9 of her schools are in the Jane and Finch neighborhood. 10 is in the Birchmont and Shepherd area. So if you know the Toronto area, you know that she is like way west and a little bit over east. So she's in her car in that 401 daily. She has been involved with Measuring What Matters, the project, for the past 3 years, and she's using the competencies and characteristics to frame school improvement work. And when Lynn comes up to share, she'll be highlighting some system-level use of the domains and competencies. So thank you so much for being with us this morning. If you have questions as you go, just write them down, and we'll try our best to make sure that we can find a time to answer them as best as we can. So we'll begin. Allison.
Do I just need to change slides?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. I'm going to time myself because, admittedly, this is the first time I've gone through this presentation. So I am, emotionally grateful to be here today and excited to be with my tribe and my people who sort of understand where we're coming from and hopefully where we're going. So about the time that I started working with People for Education and the Measuring What Matters framework, I had sort of become absorbed by this Michael Fullan quote. As a teacher of 13 years, I had already seen the educational pendulum swing a number of times as new programs came and went, claiming to be the best at this or the best at that. And year after year, I was in service on board initiatives, and sometimes they were applicable. But the sessions kept coming and going, and for the most part, they felt really disjointed. And the thing that I kept seeing over and over and again was that our students were sort of missing. They were absent from any of the initiatives that we were taking on. So I often left thinking that the individual or the person sitting in front of me in a classroom was completely lost. So I started to think, how could I give a voice back to these kids that were in front of me, my grade 4s and 5s, and how might they see themselves in research and policy in education? So I had decided that I was going to try and give them a voice, and I wondered what would happen if I started giving students back the documents that were written about them, if it would give them a voice and a place in educational reform. Oh, it didn't change.
You keep talking. I'll be
Sure.
provided.
Thank you. So I developed a model that I use in my classroom that I call student-led curriculum inquiry, and that literally means that I took ministry documents, educational literature, and I handed it over to 10-year-olds. I had no idea what was going to happen, and I sort of made it up as I went along with my students. And it's grown into something really fantastic and really cool that I feel this tremendous obligation to share their successes, not necessarily my own, but what I see my kids doing every day. So the pedagogical stance that I took in the classroom wasn't new, and it was influenced by Michael Fullan and Ken Robinson and Sugatra Mitra, among others. But it was my commitment and unwavering determination to hear my students, to build a classroom community that went beyond the walls of our classroom and out into the community. It was an intentional and purposeful approach to learning that felt urgent, and that I couldn't help but find both emotional and inspiring when I saw it happen. It's a way of being in a classroom that's grounded in research and driven by student voice. When I began, So I began by handing over the math curriculum with, sorry, can I change slides?
Yes. So I set it up for you, so you just have to click now, because it's that arrow right here that does it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right?
Thanks.
There, I changed it.
So I had started doing this in math, and I handed over the math curriculum to them, and they pulled apart expectations, trying to determine the intended learning outcomes of specific goals. And what I saw was 10-year-olds deconstructing curriculum as well, if not better, than some of the teachers that I sat in the staff room with. So when I began working with People for Education and Measuring What Matters, my first thought was that I couldn't wait to share the actual documents with my students. Well, I immediately found value in the broader goals and success of the domains. It was more important to me that my 33 grade 4s and 5s found meaning in it for themselves. So with Dave's permission, I put my kids into small groups, gave them some chart paper and markers, and let them pull years of research apart in our classroom. So this is on the one side is the Measuring What Matters document that I gave them, and this is what my kids did for each of the domains. In groups, they came up with what creativity meant to them in our classroom, how we could see that happening every day, and then how we could use that to assess the broader goals and learning that was happening each day. On the sticky note was sort of their slogan for creativity, and in their words, it was that creativity is something that's in your mind that isn't yet in the world. And we use that over and over each day. We come back to it. And it was a 9-year-old that came up with that. So that's sort of our philosophy when we're talking about creativity in the classroom. While my class and I have always operated outside of the norm, when we got into the Measuring What Matters framework and the domains and had sort of lived them for a couple of months, it gave us a common language that was easily accessible to have rich conversations about the broad and ambiguous areas of learning. Well, in the past years, I had used the 6 learning skills for the kids to sort of have these conversations. What I immediately found was that the level of thought and introspection really increased when we used these domains specifically. I've always started the day out with a 1-kilometer run, which the students always just thought of as DPA. It was our 20 minutes of fitness. And as soon as we started talking about the health domain, they started having richer conversations about
My big wondering is on the screen, right? So why is small data? That's what Dave and I have been calling it, small data. Examples, the documentation, the conversations, observations, notes, artifacts, same thing that people use in their classrooms. Why are they such an important big idea when thinking about school improvement processes, monitoring, and principal learning? Because my job, my class, is to influence principals, and then their job is to influence into their schools, right? So I really, last year, focused on the question, how am I going to collaboratively build the capacity for documenting learning and monitoring growth and learning? Because one of the things I noticed when I started out on my school visits was we had a lot of talk about EQAO data. A lot of talk about that. And I was like, yeah, well, how do you know learning's happening? And then they'd say, well, you know, because of this, this, and this. And I'd say to them, yeah, but, you know, your cohort's too small to actually compare this year's data to last year's data. None of our schools have 300 to 500 kids in grade 3 or 6. So, like, not even my high school that I have only has 700 kids. We can't even look from year to year at their grade 9. So how do we actually know that learning is happening in your school? And it was tough. It was tough for people to answer when I pushed them on that kindly. I pushed them kindly. I think they would say that about me. But so I started thinking about how do the competencies or characteristics from Measuring What Matters fit into that journey. Because in TDSB, we went from, you know, the compliance school improvement planning process, those are my words, where you had to pick 3 goals, and one of them was that everybody's EQAO had to improve by 10%. And I remember as a principal, we'd write it down, and we'd hand it in, and then we'd do the real work. And then we'd kind of at the end of the year go, oh boy, we hope we got that 10% improvement. But my school was small in my first principalship, so sometimes making that move of 10% was really challenging. So as a principal, my question was like, how do we know learning is happening? In the TDSB last year, we were fortunate enough to be able to move to a more school-based ownership process of school improvement planning. So it fit perfectly in with these conditions, right? Every school just has to come up with 3 foci or 3 goals. 1 in the area of student achievement, 1 in well-being, kind of 1 in equity, but the equity goal should filter through everything. So some schools have 2 goals and they articulate how the equity goal lives within them. Others have a separate equity goal, but they also articulate how that lives within their well-being and achievement goal. So I've really looked at these conditions here. You can read them, I won't read them to you, but a lot of it, as you can see, has to do with the documentation of learning in the school. So what am I and the principal seeing?